What if you could peer into the future? Not just to see tomorrow's weather, but to glimpse the very face of the person you were destined to marry. What if in the year 1420, a simple ritual held the key to unlocking that profound secret? For centuries before dating apps and social media, people longed for a hint, a sign, a whisper from fate about their future beloved. The medieval world, steeped in mystery and lore, offered countless ways for eager hearts to try and pull back the veil. From quiet kitchens to haunted churchyards, young men and women sought answers, often through practices that seem strange and wondrous to us today. But did these ancient methods truly work? Did they reveal true love? Or just a trick of the light and a hopeful imagination? Let us journey back to a time when prophecy was not just a story, but a desperate yearning for certainty. Number 6. Scrying. Mirror and water. Scrying, the ancient practice of gazing into a reflective surface to receive visions, was one of the most potent and revered forms of divination in the medieval period. Whether through a polished mirror, a dark pool of water, or even a crystal ball, people sought to glimpse hidden truths. And for many, that truth was the face of their future spouse. This age-old art, predating medieval times by millennia, found renewed popularity in an era where scientific understanding was still in its infancy, and the natural world was seen as imbued with hidden forces. From the most learned alchemists to the simplest village-wise women, scrying was believed to offer a direct conduit to unseen realms, to past lives, or to the unfolding events of the future. The very act of concentrating on a still, dark surface was thought to quiet the mind, opening it to receive subtle impressions that were otherwise hidden by the noise and distractions of daily life. In the medieval era, scrying was practiced by everyone from professional seers and cunning folk, who might charge a considerable sum for their services, to curious commoners and even some nobility seeking clandestine answers about their alliances, their enemies, and their hearts. The belief was that the reflective surface acted as a portal or a focal point, allowing images from the past, present, or future to appear. Water, especially, was considered sacred and pure, a living element that could reflect more than just light. Mirrors, often made of polished bronze, silver, or even obsidian, were rare and valuable objects, further enhancing their mystical appeal. Practice required intense concentration, a clear mind, and often a specific time or place that was believed to be more potent for divination, such as a moonlit night, the hour of midnight, or a quiet, secluded chamber far from prying eyes and earthly sounds. It was a deeply personal ritual, often undertaken in solitude or with only a trusted guide. The scryer would typically sit in a dimly lit room, perhaps by the flickering glow of a single candle or the soft illumination of moonlight in front of the suitable reflective surface. This could be a finely polished obsidian mirror, a dark pool of water in a plain ceramic bowl, the still surface of a secluded well, or even a natural spring in a quiet woodland clearing. With their gaze fixed intently on the surface, the scryer would endeavor to clear their mind of all other thoughts, focusing solely on their desire to see their future spouse. Sometimes a specific incantation or silent prayer would be repeated, a mantra to invite the vision. The goal was to reach a trance-like state, a mental stillness where the surface of the mirror or water would begin to blur, to swirl, or to darken until images slowly began to form within its depths. These visions might be hazy, fleeting, or surprisingly clear, blurring the lines between reality and illusion until a face, a figure, or even a symbolic scene appeared, believed to be a glimpse of their destined love. The interpretation of these visions was often as challenging as their appearance, requiring intuition and a hopeful heart. Lady Genevieve, 1390. France. In the sprawling stone fortress that was her family seat, Lady Genevieve felt an unfamiliar dread creep into her heart as discussions of her impending marriage to a distant, older count grew more serious. She was a young woman of refined sensibilities and a keen intellect, yearning for a connection beyond mere political alliance. Whispers of an old, wise woman who lived in the secluded woods on the edge of their lands reached her ears. This woman was rumored to possess profound scrying abilities, able to glimpse the secrets of the future. Driven by a desperate hope, Genevieve secretly sought her out, paying a hefty sum from her meager personal allowance. The wise woman, her face a rotate of wrinkles, and her eyes sharp and knowing, instructed Genevieve to gaze into a large, dark pool of water within a hidden cave on a moonless night, urging her to approach the ritual with a pure heart and an open mind. Genevieve, wrapped in a thick cloak against the chill of the evening, descended into the damp cave. The air heavy with the scent of earth and damp stone, she stared into the murky depths of the pool, her eyes burning from the strain, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fervent hope. Slowly, painstakingly, a hazy, shifting image began to coalesce within the darkness. A man with a distinctive, proud nose, a firm jaw, and a thoughtful, serious expression in his eyes. He seemed to carry an air of quiet authority. Genevieve gasped, a small, involuntary sound echoing in the cavern. The image flickered, then vanished, leaving only her own reflection gazing back at her. She returned to the castle, feeling both exhilarated and confused, the vision imprinted on her mind. A few months later, as the political landscape shifted, her family unexpectedly arranged a marriage with a different suitor, a distant cousin named Lord Etienne, a man she had never met. When she first saw him enter the great hall, she felt a jolt of recognition so profound it nearly made her stumble. His profile, especially his proud aristocratic nose and the serious contemplative look in his deep-set eyes, was precisely as she had seen it in the dark pool. Their marriage, though rooted in duty and family ties, blossomed into a union of respect and quiet understanding. Lord Etienne, despite his serious demeanor, proved to be a man of great integrity and a surprising depth of kindness. Their partnership brought stability and prosperity to both their houses, and Genevieve found a quiet contentment in their shared life. Years later, as she looked at Lord Etienne across the feasting table, or watched him thoughtfully studying a scroll, she would often recall the precise image from the scrying pool, believing it had truly shown her a glimpse of the man who would be her life's steadfast companion, allowing her to recognize him. Brother Thomas, 1260 Monastery in Germany. Young Brother Thomas, a novice at a quiet Benedictine monastery nestled deep in the German forests, found himself struggling with the strictures of his monastic vows. Doubts about his true calling gnawed at him, especially during the long, silent hours of prayer. He secretly sought out an old, disgraced monk who resided in a secluded hermitage near the monastery, a man known for his forbidden knowledge and his uncanny ability to read omens. The old monk, his eyes clouded but sharp, offered to let Thomas scry into a polished silver mirror, a family heirloom he kept hidden. Thomas, nervous but desperate for any sign of his true path, agreed. He sat in the dim light of the hermit's cell, gazing into the cold, gleaming surface of the mirror, willing it to show him a life beyond the monastery walls, perhaps a wife, a family, a different destiny. He stared for a long, arduous time, his eyes growing tired and watering from the strain. What he eventually saw was not a woman's face, nor any romantic tableau. Instead, a blurred image formed, strong, calloused hands moving diligently, and then a fleeting flash of an illuminated manuscript page, its intricate designs glowing with an otherworldly light. Thomas blinked, and the image vanished. He left the monastery disappointed, convinced the scrying had failed, feeling foolish for indulging in such a superstitious act. He returned to his monastic duties, resigned to his fate. Yet slowly, something shifted. He found himself drawn to the scriptorium, the monastery's copying room, where the monks meticulously transcribed and illustrated holy texts. He discovered a surprising aptitude for the work, his hands proving steady and precise with quill and brush. Over the years, he became a renowned scribe and illuminator, his hands indeed growing strong and calloused from years of copying and illustrating holy texts, his artistry bringing light and beauty to ancient words. His life became one of quiet dedication and profound scholarship, a different kind of fulfillment than he had initially sought. He never took a wife, but he found deep contentment in his craft, feeling a spiritual connection to the sacred texts he brought to life. In later years, as he meticulously painted a new initial on a parchment, he would sometimes recall the blurred image of hands and the illuminated manuscript page in the silver mirror, realizing with a start that the scrying had not failed at all. It had shown him his true path, not as a spouse, but as a devoted craftsman to the church, a life as rich and meaningful as any other. Young Martha, 1440, Flanders. Martha, a spirited village girl with a mischievous glint in her eye, adored tales of local folk, magic. She had heard whispers from her older cousins about scrying in a clear spring on certain feast days, believing it could show a glimpse of a future beloved. Full of playful daring and a secret crush on a handsome farmer's son named Willem, she decided to try it. On a crisp dawn, well before the sun had fully risen, she snuck out of her family's cottage, her bare feet silent on the dewy grass. She crept to the local spring, nestled beneath a gnarled oak tree, its waters renowned for their purity. She knelt by its edge, the cold mist rising around her, and gazed into its still cold waters, whispering the name of young Willem under her breath, hoping his face would appear. She stared intently, her reflection rippling slightly from her own breath, seeing only the shifting reflections of the overhanging trees and the pale morning sky. No face appeared, no ghostly figure. The water remained stubbornly, beautifully, empty of any human form. Disappointed, feeling a little foolish, she eventually returned home as the sun began to warm the fields. Life, as it often does, unfolded along its own course. Martha later married another farmer, a man named Peter, a man chosen by her family for his sturdy land, his good prospects, and his steady, dependable nature. Pieter was not the dashing Willem of her youthful dreams, but he was kind, hard-working, and deeply devoted to her. Their marriage was one of quiet strength and enduring affection, a partnership built on shared labor and mutual respect. Martha grew to love him deeply over time, a love that blossomed from the roots of shared life rather than a sudden passionate recognition. She often chuckled at her youthful attempt at scrying, believing it to be mere superstition, convinced that true love came from shared experience and daily kindness, not from fleeting reflections in a spring. Her future spouse was a reality, not a vision, and sometimes the best partnerships are simply grown through shared life, unrevealed by magic, their depth found in the everyday, unheralded moments. Eleanor of Aquitaine, 1150, France. Even legendary figures like Eleanor of Aquitaine, a woman of immense power, sharp intellect, and profound historical influence, were touched by the era's pervasive beliefs in prophecy and omens. Though no direct verifiable accounts exist of her personally engaging in scrying, it was a common and intriguing practice in noble courts across Europe, especially among young women eager to understand their futures. One could easily imagine the young Eleanor, perhaps in her vibrant youth, before her first marriage to Louis VII of France, during a quiet moment in a secluded chamber at her family's opulent ducal palace, gazing into a polished silver dish or a basin of dark still water. Would she have seen the pious, scholarly, almost monastic face of Louis, her first husband, whose gentle nature ultimately proved a mismatch for her formidable spirit? Or perhaps the formidable lion-like red-haired visage of Henry Plantagenet, her second husband, a man of overwhelming ambition who would become King of England and father to her famous, often rebellious sons. Or perhaps the scrying would have shown her not a specific face, but a broader, more symbolic vision of her destiny. A gleaming crown, a vast windswept battlefield, the tumultuous waves of the sea, or a long, arduous journey across distant lands. Such images would have reflected the immense political and historical destiny that awaited her. A future defined by alliances, conflicts, and the very shaping of European history, overshadowing any individual romantic partner. Her life was indeed defined by two royal marriages, each profoundly different, each marked by power, struggles, progeny, and political machinations. The scrying, if she had performed it, might have shown her a future of immense power and constant upheaval, the true complex nature of her marital destiny, rather than a simple, sentimental love match. It would have been a stark revelation, perhaps, of the weighty responsibilities and monumental impact that her unions would bear on nations far beyond the personal desires of the young woman's heart. The mirror would have reflected not just a face, but an empire. Lord Richard. 1300 England. Lord Richard, a hardened warrior and a man of few words, understood the importance of lineage and securing his lands through a suitable marriage. He was a man who trusted his sword arm more than whispered prophecies. Yet when his aging mother, steeped in old country lore, urged him to consult an old hermit known for his prophetic visions through a deep, shadowy well, Richard felt obliged to try. He rode to the hermit's secluded dwelling, a rough stone hut near an ancient, moss-covered well, its waters rumored to connect to the underworld. Richard, a man of action, scoffed internally at the idea of gazing into a mere hole in the ground. But he dismounted and peered into the darkness of the well. He saw only the murky, cold reflections of his own stern, anxious face and the distant, swirling clouds. Then, for a fleeting, almost imperceptible moment, a woman's face seemed to flicker in the depths, but it was indistinct, almost like a shadow, with no clear features he could later recall, no specific detail to cling to. He blinked, and it was gone. He dismissed it as an effect of the dim light, the chill in the air, and his own weariness. He left feeling no wiser. Months later, his family arranged a marriage with Lady Elizabeth, a woman from a lesser noble house, known not for her beauty but for her quiet strength, her unwavering loyalty, and her remarkable ability to manage a sprawling estate with calm efficiency. Their union was practical, a partnership that brought peace and stability to Richard's often turbulent life, and she bore him strong, healthy sons. Richard never remembered the shadowy face from the well when he looked at Elizabeth. She was simply the steady presence in his life, the foundation upon which his household was built. Yet, looking back, perhaps, the prophecy had shown him the essence of his future partner, a quiet, steadfast presence, a grounding force in his often chaotic world, rather than a concrete, recognizable image. Perhaps the well had hinted that he, a man of war and constant motion, needed a quiet, anchoring force in his life, even if he did not recognize her in the fleeting vision. The future sometimes whispers, rather than shouts, hinting at the nature of a bond more than the features of a face. Number 5. Dream divination. Herbal. Pillow. The medieval mind placed profound significance on dreams, viewing them as powerful messages from the divine, from spirits, or even from one's own deepest self, unburdened by the distractions of the waking world. Dreams were not mere random thoughts, but windows into hidden truths, portents of future events, or guidance from unseen forces. To specifically coax a dream of a future spouse, people often turned to the potent realm of herbal magic, creating special pillows or sachets designed to induce prophetic visions, believing that the subtle properties of plants could open the pathways to the subconscious and the spiritual. Herbalism was not just about medicine in medieval Europe. It was deeply intertwined with folklore, magic, and spiritual beliefs. Every plant, from the common daisy to the rare mandrake, was thought to possess specific virtues and magical properties, especially in matters of love, protection, healing, and, critically, prophecy. This practice was widespread across all social classes, from the peasant woman gathering wildflowers in the meadow at dawn to the noble lady instructing her personal apothecary on the precise blend of exotic herbs. The key to successful dream divination often involved more than just the herbs themselves. It required absolute silence during preparation, a state of personal purity, and a strong, unwavering intention from the diviner. Specific moon phases, such as the new or full moon or certain days of the week, were sometimes chosen for the ritual, believed to enhance the herb's power and the dream's clarity. The quiet intimacy of the ritual, often performed alone in a darkened room, added to its allure and perceived effectiveness. One common method involved the careful collection of specific herbs, chosen for their known associations with love, truth, or prophetic dreams. Rosemary, with its strong association with remembrance and love; vervain, a sacred herb believed to protect against evil and aid divination; calming lavender or yarrow, often used in love spells and believed to show the future, beloved, were popular choices. These herbs would be meticulously gathered, often on a particular moon phase or day that enhanced their potency, then dried, carefully crushed, and finally ground. Prepared herbs would then be sewn into a small linen pillow or sachet, sometimes mixed with a lock of one's own hair, a piece of a loved one's clothing, or a small symbolic token. This dream pillow would then be reverently placed under one's head at night, just before drifting to sleep. Before sleeping, the individual would focus intensely on their desire to see their future spouse, perhaps repeating a silent prayer or charm, a quiet plea to the unseen forces, and then drift into slumber, hoping for a vivid, telling dream that would reveal the face of their destined partner, or at least a powerful clue. Isabel of Kent, 1370 England. In the bustling market town of Canterbury, Isabel, a young woman known for her gentle nature and bright smile, yearned for a kind husband who would love her for herself, rather than a purely practical match arranged by her family. She had heard enchanting tales of herbal dream pillows from her grandmother, a woman whose hands were stained with the knowledge of countless plants and their secrets. Inspired by these stories, Isabel resolved to try the ancient practice. She carefully gathered fresh yarrow and aromatic rosemary from the fields just beyond the town's ancient walls, plucking them at twilight on a waxing moon as her grandmother had once advised. She dried them meticulously by her hearth fire, their scent filling her small cottage. Then, with nimble fingers, she sewed the crushed herbs into a small linen pouch, her mind focused intently on her wish, murmuring silent prayers as each stitch was made. That night, with a flutter of anticipation, she placed the fragrant sachet beneath her pillow, the scent of the herbs filling her nostrils as she drifted into sleep. Her dream was remarkably clear and coherent. She found herself standing by a flowing river, the sunlight dappling through the leaves of ancient trees. A man with dark, unruly hair and a distinctive faint scar visible just above his left eyebrow stood by a rough-hewn workbench, his back turned to her. As he slowly turned, he smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes, and continued to work with wood, shaping it with skilled hands. She woke with the dawn, the dream clinging to her mind with a vivid persistence, a profound sense of wonder permeating her thoughts. Several months later, her family needed a new roof beam for their crumbling cottage, a task that required a master carpenter. A man arrived from a neighboring village, introduced as Thomas. He was indeed tall, with dark, unruly hair, and unmistakably a small, faint scar just above his left eyebrow. As he worked, he often hummed or laughed to himself, his movements skilled and joyful, his hands strong and sure. Isabel felt a strange, almost spiritual sense of recognition, a feeling that this meeting had been foreseen, a destiny unfolding before her very eyes. Their courtship was brief but tender, marked by shared laughter and quiet conversations by the river. Their marriage was indeed a happy one, a union built on mutual respect and genuine affection, just as the dream had seemed to promise. Isabel often wondered if the herbs had simply prepared her heart to recognize him, or if they had truly shown her a literal glimpse of her destiny, a subtle guiding hand of fate. Sir Julian de Montfort, 1285, France. Sir Julian, a knight nearing the age when he felt a pressing duty to take a wife and secure his lineage, was a man of logic and battle strategy, high-liska charms. However, after a particularly frustrating year of fruitless negotiations for a suitable bride, and feeling the weight of his family's expectations, a grizzled old hermit he encountered on a solitary journey back to his ancestral lands suggested a dream ritual involving vervain and frankincense. Desperate for any clarity in his seemingly stalled quest for a wife, Julian, against his better judgment, indulged the hermit. He acquired the herbs, their earthy, pungent scent filling his bedchamber, and placed the carefully prepared herbal sachet beneath his pillow, focusing intently on a vision of a virtuous lady, one who would bring honor and stability to his ancient house. His dream that night was not of a specific face or a romantic encounter. Instead, he dreamed vividly of a sprawling, ancient oak tree, its gnarled roots reaching deep into the earth, its mighty branches spreading wide, providing shelter for countless small creatures, its presence radiating an aura of unwavering strength and timeless endurance. He woke feeling rather confused, attributing the strange dream to the unusual potent herbs and his own anxieties. Shortly after, a surprising proposal arrived from a lesser noble family in a distant province, offering their daughter, Lady Agnes. Her family's crest, Julian noted with a jolt of recognition, prominently featured an ancient, stylized oak. Lady Agnes herself was not outwardly beautiful or vivacious, but possessed an inner strength, a quiet dignity, and a remarkable capability that reminded Julian of the tree from his dream. Their marriage was not one of grand passion or ardent romance, but it was incredibly stable, deeply practical, and remarkably fertile, securing his line and bringing profound peace and prosperity to his sometimes turbulent estates. Julian often found himself observing the majestic ancient oak that stood proudly on his own lands, pondering if his dream had indeed revealed his future, not as a face, but as a powerful symbol of steadfastness, enduring lineage, and the quiet, deep-rooted strength that defined his life with Agnes. Lara, 1490. Ireland. Lara, a young woman from a remote Irish settlement, nestled by the wild sea, harbored a deep love for music and yearned for a husband who would share her passion, a partner with whom she could sing and play by the hearth. She meticulously prepared a dream pillow, using wild thyme, gathered from the sun-drenched hillsides, and fragrant marjoram herbs known for their connection to joy dreams and prophetic visions. She placed the sachet under her head for 3 consecutive nights, diligently attempting to coax a vision of her musically inclined soulmate. Each morning she awoke, trying to meticulously record her dreams in her mind's eye, searching for any sign of a melodious future. On the first night, she dreamed vividly of a stormy, churning sea, its waves crashing against jagged rocks. On the second, a flock of crows, dark and ominous, circled endlessly above a desolate field. On the third, she found herself lost within a dense, tangled forest, the trees pressing in on all sides. Not a single human face, no strains of music, no sign of a beloved appeared in any of her visions. Disappointed and disheartened, she eventually discarded the sachet, convinced the magic had not worked for her. A few years later, Lara married Liam, a fisherman, a man of few words whose hands were rough from the sea, and who often returned from his voyages with a haunted, distant look in his eyes. He appreciated her beautiful singing, often listening quietly from the doorway. But he never joined her, never hummed a tune alongside her. Their life together was hard, often buffeted by the very storms she had dreamed of, their existence a constant battle against the harsh elements. Ilara never saw a direct romantic link between her unsettling dreams and Liam, yet she often wondered in the quiet moments if the troubled, somber visions had not been a premonition of a specific person, but rather a profound warning about the challenging, arduous nature of the life that awaited them, the very essence of their shared journey. The dream pillow had spoken, perhaps, but not in the language of romantic fantasy she had hoped to hear, instead revealing a more stark yet equally true aspect of her destiny. Master Geoffrey, 1320, England. Master Geoffrey, a prosperous and highly astute merchant in a thriving English port town, was looking for a wife who was as shrewd in business and as capable in managing finances as he was himself. He was a man of logic and figures, but he understood the value of all tools, even those considered mystical. He decided to commission a skilled herbalist, a secretive woman named Isolde, who lived on the edge of the town and was known for her potent concoctions, to create a powerful dream sachet. He specifically requested herbs associated with wisdom, prosperity, and keen judgment, even if the cost was high. Isolde, with her knowing smile, provided him with a carefully balanced blend of fragrant bay leaf, vibrant cinquefoil, and a rare dark root, offering strict whispered instructions for its use. Geoffrey, despite his inherent cynicism, followed the instructions precisely, placing the sachet under his head on a moonless night, willing himself to dream of a successful match, a partner who would enhance his thriving enterprise. His dream was a confusing jumble of images, a whirlwind of ledger books overflowing with figures, vast coffers brimming with gold coins, and a shadowy, indistinct figure counting endless rows of numbers. He woke up feeling no closer to an answer, only a lingering headache and a vague sense of unease. He dismissed it as the random workings of an overly stimulated mind. A few months later, at a prominent trade fair, he engaged himself to Lady Beatrice, a woman he had met through business dealings. She was indeed sharp, intelligent, and an exceptionally capable manager of her own family's substantial finances. Their marriage was less a love match and more a formidable partnership of wealth, ambition, and strategic acumen, and together they built an even more formidable trading empire, their fortunes swelling. Geoffrey never consciously attributed their success to the dream sachet, viewing it as a mere coincidence, or perhaps a subconscious reflection of his own desires and aspirations. Yet, the shadowy figure and the overflowing coffers of his dream were a striking, almost literal parallel to the life he built with Beatrice, a life where financial shrewdness was indeed the key ingredient to their shared future. The dream perhaps had not shown him a person's face, but the very essence of their shared destiny, a vision of their combined prosperity. Number 4. Apple peeling. The simple, everyday act of peeling an apple held profound significance for medieval diviners, transforming a common fruit into a tool for foretelling the future. This particular ritual, often imbued with a playful yet hopeful magic, was believed to reveal the initial of a future beloved, turning an ordinary kitchen task into a moment of captivating suspense. Core belief was that the peeled skin, when carefully removed in a single unbroken strip and then flung over one's shoulder, would magically coil or fall into a shape resembling the first letter of the person destined to be their spouse. Apples were ubiquitous in medieval Europe, not just as a staple food source, but also as powerful symbols in folklore and mythology. They represented love, fertility, knowledge, thanks to their biblical associations, and even immortality. This particular peeling ritual was incredibly popular among young unmarried women, frequently performed at lively gatherings, harvest festivals, or during quiet evenings by the hearth. Though it could also be a private, clandestine endeavor, it required a steady hand, a patient spirit, and a genuine belief in the power of this simple ancient magic. Its widespread nature across different social classes made it as much a common parlor game, often accompanied by laughter and nervous chatter, as it was a serious attempt at prophecy. The air of eager anticipation and shared secret added to its charm and perceived efficacy, turning an ordinary fruit into a vessel of romantic destiny. The ritual itself was deceptively straightforward, yet surprisingly challenging. An individual would select a ripe, unblemished apple and, using a small, sharp knife, attempt to peel the entire skin off in one continuous, unbroken strip. Great care and steady concentration were required to prevent the delicate peel from snapping. A broken peel was often seen as an omen of bad luck or a disrupted future, prompting sighs of disappointment. Once the peel was successfully removed in a single flowing piece, the person would swing it around their head 3 times, sometimes silently repeating their wish or the name of a desired future, and then, with a hopeful heart, throw it over their left shoulder without looking. The shape the fallen peel formed on the ground was then interpreted. Whatever letter of the alphabet it most closely resembled was believed to be the first initial of the person's future spouse. Clarity of the letter was paramount. A distinct, clear initial brought great excitement, while a tangled, ambiguous shape often led to much debate and speculation among those observing. Elspeth, a miller's daughter, 1405, England. In a small, bustling village, nestled by a winding river, Elspeth, the miller's daughter, was known not only for her cheerful disposition, but owned by years of handling intricate weaving looms. At a lively autumn harvest festival, amidst much laughter and the communal chatter of the villagers, she decided to try the famed apple peel prophecy. She selected a large, ripe apple, its skin gleaming red in the lamplight. With a small, keen knife, she carefully began to peel, her brow furrowed in intense concentration, her fingers moving with precise, almost surgical skill. To everyone's astonishment, and to a burst of delighted applause, she produced a perfect, unbroken spiral of apple skin, remarkably long and intact. With a triumphant grin, a flush on her cheeks, she swung it thrice around her head, feeling a thrill of anticipation, and then cast it over her left shoulder without a glance back. It landed on the straw-covered floor, curling into a distinct and unmistakable hay shape. Elspeth's heart fluttered with nervous excitement. She knew a handsome young apprentice baker named Henry in the next village, a lad with whom she had exchanged shy glances at the weekly market. Her hopes soared, a romantic dream taking root. A few months later, however, her hopes were dashed when Henry, seeking better prospects, moved away to seek his fortune in a larger town, leaving Elspeth heartbroken. She felt the apple peel had misled her, or perhaps her heart had simply interpreted the initial as a false promise. The following spring, a new miller's apprentice arrived in their very own village, a strong, quiet, and dependable man named Hamish. He was not the dashing Henry of her fleeting romantic fantasy, but he possessed a steady kindness and a diligent work ethic that slowly, steadily drew Elspeth's admiration. Their shared days by the mill, the rhythm of their work brought them closer, and eventually they married, building a good, sturdy life together by the mill pond. Elspeth often thought of the clear from her apple peel, wondering if it had simply been a general signpost to happiness rather than a specific person, or if the initial had simply been waiting for the right aid to come along, a future that unfolded in its own unexpected yet ultimately fulfilling way. Lord Alaric, 1290, France. Lord Alaric, a man of considerable influence and imposing stature, but possessed of little patience for frivolous pursuits or romantic notions, found himself participating in the apple-peeling game at a grand winter feast in his formidable castle. He joined in more for the amusement of his guests than out of any genuine conviction in the ritual's power. He selected an apple with a dismissive air, and with a rather clumsy attempt at peeling, his knife slipped and his peel broke twice before he finally managed to produce a single continuous strip, albeit a rather ragged one. With a dismissive shrug and a wry smile, he tossed it over his shoulder, expecting nothing. It landed in a convoluted, messy tangle, resembling nothing recognizable, certainly not a letter of the alphabet. Alaric laughed it off heartily, his booming voice filling the hall, declaring the whole thing a jape. He later married Lady Isabel, a practical, capable, and rather formidable woman, chosen by his family primarily for her excellent dowry and her vast land holdings, which greatly expanded his own territory. There was no I or any other initial clearly visible in his apple peel that night, and certainly no romantic vision preceded their union. Their marriage was one of convenience and mutual respect, devoid of grand passion, but remarkably successful in managing their combined estates, increasing their wealth, and producing numerous healthy heirs. Alaric often mused in later years that the convoluted, tangled peel had accurately reflected the complicated politics and intricate negotiations that had led to his arranged marriage, rather than a specific initial suggesting that sometimes the prophecy speaks to the nature of the union, its complexities and practicalities, rather than simply identifying a name. It was a partnership of duty and gain, much like the irregular shape had implied. Margot, a seamstress, 1350, Paris. In the bustling, aromatic atelier of a master tailor in medieval Paris, Margot, a young seamstress with quick, nimble fingers and a quiet, observant nature, believed firmly in omens and the subtle workings of fate. She longed for a loving marriage, especially to the quiet, handsome tailor who often brought rich fabrics to her shop, a man named Pierre whose gentle smile had captured her heart. One evening, after the lamps were extinguished and the other seamstresses had departed, Margot remained alone in her small, cozy room, resolving to perform the apple peel divination in secret, seeking a sign about Pierre. She carefully selected a crisp, green apple, its surface cool beneath her fingers. Her needle-nimble fingers, accustomed to intricate embroidery, worked with remarkable precision, slowly, meticulously peeling the apple. The peel emerged in a single, delicate spiral. With a whispered prayer, she swung it around her head and cast it over her shoulder. It landed on the wooden floor, curling into a distinct, undeniable P. Margot's heart swelled with overwhelming joy and triumphant certainty. Surely it was Pierre. Her hope soared, and she felt a surge of courage. She began to subtly encourage his visits, finding excuses to prolong their conversations, her smiles growing warmer, her gaze more direct. Pierre, however, though kind and courteous, remained distant, and Margot soon discovered, to her crushing heartbreak, that he was already betrothed to a woman in his home village, a fact he had kept quiet out of modesty. Weeks turned into months, and her initial hope faded, replaced by a profound disappointment. Then, a new merchant, a genial and boisterous man named Philippe, began frequenting the atelier, selling rich silks and vibrant dyes. He was captivated by Margot's quiet skill and her gentle charm, and he began to court her with an earnestness that was hard to resist. She, after her initial period of grief, found herself surprisingly drawn to his warmth, his genuine interest, and his hearty laughter. They married within the year, and Philippe proved to be a devoted and loving husband, their life together filled with quiet contentment and shared joys. Margot often looked back at the clear P of her apple peel and wondered if it had been a true premonition, not of Pierre, but of the very different yet equally kind Philippe, a delightful twist of fate. The initial was correct, but the person was a surprising, unexpected blessing, highlighting how prophecies can be tantalizingly vague, leaving room for life's beautiful surprises. Young William, 1420 Scotland. In a rough-hewn Scottish village, young William, a spirited lad with a penchant for mischief and a desire to impress his friends, was dared by his companions to try the apple peel divination during a quiet evening by the hearth, the fire casting dancing shadows on their faces. William was more interested in showing off his burgeoning knife skills than genuinely divining his future wife, but he accepted the challenge with a grin. He chose a firm apple and, with a confident flourish, expertly peeled it, creating a long, perfect spiral, his friends watching in awe. He flung it over his shoulder with a grand gesture, convinced he had mastered the art. It landed in a messy, ambiguous heap that looked like no letter at all, a tangled knot of skin. His friends jeered good-naturedly, claiming he had no future wife, or perhaps a wife whose name started with an unpronounceable symbol. William simply laughed it off, dismissing the ritual as silly fun. William grew into a strong, dependable man, a respected member of his clan. He eventually married a woman named Isabel, a robust and cheerful lass from a neighboring clan, a woman he had known since childhood, their families long intertwined through friendship and trade. Her name began with an I, but his apple peel had given him no clear initial, no hint of her. Their marriage was one of practical affection and shared responsibilities, building a strong family and contributing to their community. Perhaps William often fought in later years, watching Isabel calmly manage their bustling household. The apple peel was truly meant for those whose paths were still uncertain, whose destinies needed a nudge from fate. His own destiny, he mused, was always meant to be woven into the very fabric of his community, where alliances and practicalities often dictated unions more than mystical signs. His future was clear and certain, even if the apple had been stubbornly silent on the specific matter of Isabel's name, proving that sometimes life's truest paths unfold without needing a prophetic spotlight. Number 3. Nut burning. The seemingly simple act of throwing nuts into a fire held profound significance for medieval diviners, particularly those seeking insights into the complex realm of romantic relationships and future marital harmony. Fire, a primal element, was believed to be a powerful purifier and a direct conduit for spiritual energy, while nuts, with their hard shells protecting a nourishing kernel, were potent symbols of life, fertility, hidden potential, and the resilience of a bond. The way these nuts reacted within the flickering flames, whether they burned steadily, crackled wildly, or flew apart, was interpreted as a clear sign of future marital harmony or impending discord. This ritual was particularly popular during harvest festivals, when the bounty of the earth was celebrated, or on specific, magically potent nights like Halloween, Samhain, when the veil between the living and spiritual worlds was believed to be thin, and communication with unseen forces was easier. It was often a communal activity, taking place by the roaring hearth in a great hall or a communal longhouse, filled with nervous laughter, hushed anticipation, and playful teasing. Young men and women would gather around the warmth of the fire, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames, their hearts brimming with curiosity and hope about their romantic prospects. Regional variations existed. In some areas, walnuts were favored. In others, hazelnuts or chestnuts, each perhaps imbued with its own specific symbolism. The air of secrecy surrounding one's chosen nuts and the silent, intense observation of their fiery fate added to the ritual's captivating power. Participants would typically take 2 nuts, carefully selecting them, and then, with a silent wish or a whispered prayer, would assign one to themselves and the other to a prospective or desired partner. These named nuts would then be placed together side by side in the glowing, incandescent embers of a fire. The interpretation of their fiery fate was crucial. If the nuts burned steadily and quietly side by side, perhaps even gently touching as they succumbed to the flames, it signified a harmonious, steadfast, and lasting union, a relationship built on mutual understanding and affection. If, however, the nuts cracked, popped loudly, or flew violently apart from each other, it foretold arguments, separation, or an unhappy, tumultuous marriage, a future filled with discord. Some variations involved naming 3 nuts, one for oneself and one for each of 2 potential partners, to see which bond was strongest and most favored by the fire. Quiet, almost reverent observation of the burning process was absolutely key. Any spoken word or sudden movement could disrupt the magic, and only through silent, focused attention could the true fiery signs be clearly interpreted. Lady Aveline and Lord Reginald, 1310, England. At a bustling, candlelit winter feast within the grand hall of her father's castle, Lady Aveline, a young woman of delicate beauty but strong will, felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Her family wished to marry her to the stern, imposing Lord Reginald, a powerful but notoriously unyielding man, and Aveline dreaded the prospect of a life bound to his cold authority. Amidst the cheerful banter and lively music, the custom of burning nuts for prophecy was introduced. With a nervous flutter in her heart, Lady Aveline selected 2 large chestnuts, carefully naming one for herself and the other for Lord Reginald. She then, with hands that trembled slightly, placed them side by side into the roaring hearth, her gaze fixed intently on their fiery fate. To her dismay, the chestnuts immediately hissed and popped violently, one even leaping out of the fire and rolling away across the cold hearthstone, while the other quickly blackened and shriveled. Aveline's heart sank. The ominous spectacle seemed to confirm all her deepest anxieties and misgivings about the match, a clear sign of discord. Despite her profound intuition and the grim omen of the popped chestnuts, the marriage proceeded as planned for pressing political and territorial reasons. Their union was indeed marked by frequent disagreements, a pervasive lack of true affection, and a palpable emotional distance. Lord Reginald remained consumed by his knightly duties and often cold in his demeanor, and Aveline found little joy or companionship in their shared life. The violently popped chestnuts seemed a grim and accurate prophecy of their tumultuous and ultimately unfulfilling marriage, a union that never truly settled into quiet harmony, forever plagued by discord and separation, just as the fire had so clearly and sadly foretold. Gareth and Alara, 1450, Wales. Gareth, a young farmer from a remote Welsh valley, was deeply and passionately in love with Alara, a spirited girl from the neighboring farm. However, their families harbored a long-standing bitter feud, a legacy of ancient grievances that threatened to keep them apart. On a quiet, crisp autumn evening, after the harvest was in and the village slept, Gareth secretly met Alara by a small hidden fire he had built in a secluded clearing, seeking an omen of their true destiny. He placed 2 smooth hazelnuts, one for himself and one for Alara, carefully into the glowing embers, their hearts pounding in unison. They watched, holding their breath, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. The nuts burned slowly and steadily, glowing together with a soft, even light, neither popping nor separating, remaining steadfastly side by side until they were reduced to glowing ash. A wave of profound relief and quiet certainty washed over them both. Buoyed by this clear, auspicious sign, they made a courageous decision. They defied their feuding families and eloped, seeking a new life together in a distant valley. Their early years were incredibly difficult, marked by the anger of their relatives and the struggle of building a new home from nothing. But their love, fortified by the vision in the fire, endured. They worked tirelessly together, weathering both literal and metaphorical storms, their bond deepening with each challenge overcome, and eventually, they built a strong, united home and a thriving farm. Their marriage, like the nuts in the fire, was a steady, warm glow, a testament to their resilient bond and unwavering commitment, proving that even against formidable obstacles, a deep underlying harmony and steadfast love could prevail. Quiet, enduring burning had truly foretold their resilient, unbreakable bond. 3 suitors for Joanna, 1375. France. Joanna, a lively and discerning maiden from a prosperous merchant family in provincial France, found herself with 3 eager and very different suitors, each offering a distinct path for her future. There was the wealthy merchant's son, offering security and comfort. the dashing young knight promising adventure and prestige, and the quiet, scholarly man whom Joanna secretly admired for his wit and gentle spirit. Unsure of her heart's true leaning, she decided to use the nut-burning ritual, hoping to discern her true path. She carefully selected 3 almonds, each one representing a suitor. One for herself, one for the merchant's son, one for the dashing knight, and one for the quiet scholar. She then, with a solemn expression, placed them into a brazier glowing with red-hot coals, holding her breath in anticipation. The almond named for the merchant's son immediately burst into flame, consumed rapidly and completely, leaving only a puff of smoke and a pile of brittle ash. The knight's almond sizzled and cracked, sending small erratic sparks flying before quickly blackening. But the scholar's almond, placed alongside her own, burned slowly and evenly, holding its shape longer than the others, glowing with a steady, soft, enduring light. Joanna felt a profound sense of clarity and inner peace descend upon her. Despite the immense pressure from her family to marry the wealthy merchant for his riches or the prestigious knight for his status, she listened to the silent, undeniable message of the nuts. She chose the scholar, a man of intellect and gentle spirit, a decision that surprised many but felt utterly right to her. Their life together was not one of grand wealth or daring adventures, but of quiet companionship, shared intellectual pursuits, and a deep mutual respect. It was a harmonious and enriching existence, much like the steady, gentle burn of the 2 almonds. The fire had shown her the true nature of her future, subtly guiding her past superficial attractions to a deeper, more enduring connection. A group of young men, 1250 Scotland. On a cold, blustery winter's night, deep in the Scottish Highlands, a group of young men from a remote village gathered around a roaring hearth fire. Their faces flushed with ale and youthful excitement, they decided to try the old nut-burning game, a diversion for the long, dark hours. Each lad, with much bravado and laughter, named a nut after himself, and then after a lass he fancied in the village. Young Callum, usually the boldest among them, found himself surprisingly nervous. He named his nut after himself, and another after his sweetheart, the quiet and gentle Morwen, his heart beating a little faster than usual. He carefully placed them into the glowing embers, watching them intently. To his dismay, his nut suddenly popped with a loud, startling report, and driven by the explosive force, jumped right out of the fire, landing cold and black on the hearthstone, a clear separation from Morwen's nut, which remained burning steadily and quietly. Callum felt a chill despite the warmth of the fire. He tried to laugh it off, but the ominous omen worried him deeply. A few months later, Callum, an impetuous and somewhat reckless youth, felt the stirrings of adventure and joined a raiding party venturing south, an escapade that took him far from the familiar valleys of his village for many years, his return uncertain. Morwen, heartbroken by his sudden departure and prolonged absence, eventually accepted the courtship of another man from the village, a steadfast and kind farmer, and they built a solid, loving family together. Callum returned years later, a changed man, matured by his experiences, to find Morwen happily settled with her family, a life she had built without him. The nuts had indeed foretold a separation, though perhaps not in the immediate romantic sense Callum had initially feared, but as a clear and undeniable sign that their paths, though once entwined by youthful affection, were destined to diverge dramatically. The fire had shown a profound truth about Callum's restless spirit and the inevitable course of their separate futures. Number 2. Dumb Cake. The dumb cake, or bride's cake, was a revered and deeply mystical medieval divination ritual performed in complete and utter silence, believed to possess the power to reveal the very image of one's future spouse, often in a vivid dream or in rare thrilling instances, as a brief ghostly vision. The absolute silence or dumbness of the ritual was paramount, considered sacred and critical to its success. Any spoken word, even a whispered breath, could break the delicate spell and render the entire prophecy null and void, an empty gesture. Food, especially bread and cakes, held deep symbolic meaning in medieval societies, representing not only sustenance, but also community celebration, and often powerful magical properties. Baking was typically a communal female activity, a shared labor of love and creation, making this particular ritual a natural fit for young women seeking intimate romantic insight. It was customarily performed on a specific, magically potent night, such as Halloween, Samhain, when the veil between the living and the spiritual worlds was believed to be exceptionally thin, or on St. Agnes's Eve, a night already associated. The air of profound mystery, the solemnity of the silent undertaking, and the strict adherence to the rules added to its immense power and alluring reputation, making it a ritual undertaken with nervous anticipation and hopeful hearts. Its secretive nature made it a truly personal quest for foreknowledge. The ritual was specific and demanding. One or more unmarried individuals would gather in a kitchen at the stroke of midnight, often by the dim light of a single candle or the dying embers of a hearth. In absolute, unwavering silence, they would begin to prepare and bake a special cake. The exact ingredients varied by region and tradition, but often included basic elements like flour, salt, and water, sometimes with symbolic additions, like eggshells, soot, or even a few drops of blood. Every single step, from the careful mixing of the dough to the patient kneading and the slow baking in the oven, had to be performed without a single word being uttered. No cough, no sigh, no giggle, no whispered instruction. The silence was an unbroken incantation in itself. Once the plain, unadorned cake was baked and cooled, each participant would take a piece. Some traditions dictated eating it while walking backward to bed, or simply placing it reverently under their pillow. It was believed that the future spouse would then appear in a dream, sometimes offering a symbolic drink of water or a significant object, or in the most thrilling and terrifying variations, even appear physically in the room, walking through the door or standing by the bedside, just as the cake was finished or as the dreamer slipped into slumber. The slightest sound, a cough, a dropped utensil, even a nervous giggle could ruin the entire ritual, dispelling the magic and sending the vision away. Agnes the Weaver, 1480, England. Agnes, a young weaver in a bustling English market town, and her two unmarried cousins, all eager for husbands and a glimpse of their future, decided to bake a dumb cake on a crisp autumn night. They slipped into the kitchen after dark, their hearts beating with a mixture of excitement and nervous apprehension. They extinguished all but one sputtering candle, its flickering flame casting long dancing shadows on the stone walls. In the profound silence they began their careful work. The only sounds in the room were the soft rustle of flour being poured, the gentle clink of ceramic bowls as they mixed, and the faint rhythmic crackle of the hearth fire. They painstakingly baked the small plain cake, its simple aroma filling the quiet room. Once it was cool, each cousin with solemn faces took a piece, then, adhering strictly to the ancient custom, walked backward to their shared bedchamber, their steps soft and deliberate. Agnes reverently placed her piece under her pillow, her mind filled with a silent plea for a glimpse of her destiny. That night, Agnes dreamed vividly, a vision as clear and distinct as if it were truly happening. She found herself by a flowing river, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, where a tall, fair-haired man, whom she did not recognize, stood. He smiled warmly and, with a kind gesture, offered her a cool cup of well water, his eyes holding a gentle warmth. She woke with the dawn, the dream clinging to her mind like a precious secret, a profound sense of wonder permeating her thoughts. Several months later, a visiting merchant from a distant town came to their village, seeking fine fabrics for his trade. He was indeed tall and fair-haired, and his laughter was open and kind. During a quiet conversation by the very well from which she drew water daily, he playfully offered her a drink from his own cup, having noticed her drawing water. Agnes felt a powerful jolt of recognition, a feeling that this meeting had been foreseen, a destiny unfolding before her eyes. Their connection was immediate and strong, a bond forged in quiet understanding, and within the year they were married. Agnes often recounted her dream to her children, always attributing her meeting with her beloved Thomas to the silent magic of the dumb cake, a prophecy that had shown her not a specific face, but the very essence of their future connection. A kindness and a gentle offering, the Sisters of Ghent, 1340 Flanders. 3 sisters from a prosperous merchant family in the bustling city of Ghent, renowned for their beauty but as yet unwed, despite many suitors, decided to try the dumb cake ritual together. They hoped to break their long streak of spinsterhood and discover their future husbands. They gathered in the spacious family kitchen at midnight, their faces solemn and intent, their movements precise as they carefully mixed the dough. Midway through the kneading process, as the flour was being incorporated, the youngest sister, startled by a sudden violent gust of wind that rattled the heavy wooden shutters with a thunderous clatter, let out a tiny involuntary gasp of fright. Her older sisters immediately shot her horrified glances, their faces grim in the flickering candlelight, their eyes wide with despair. The sacred silence had been broken. The spell, they all knew, was irrevocably ruined. They continued baking the cake out of habit and a sense of shared disappointment, but the mystical air had vanished, replaced by a tangible sense of anticlimax. They each ate their pieces of the now meaningless cake that night, but none reported any vivid dreams or mysterious visitations. A few years passed, and life, indifferent to broken spells, unfolded. The eldest sister, perhaps disillusioned with worldly expectations, eventually entered a nearby convent, finding a quiet spiritual peace there. The middle sister married an older, wealthy widower, a practical but unromantic union arranged to consolidate family fortunes. The youngest sister, who had gasped, eventually married a sailor who was often at sea for long stretches, leading a lonely but adventurous life, her dreams of a settled domesticity often unfulfilled. No one found their great love through the broken silence of the dumb cake. Perhaps the prophecy once disturbed truly held no further insight, or perhaps it simply confirmed that their paths were indeed destined to be different, unrevealed by a single shared omen, their futures too varied to be contained within one singular fragile spell. The broken silence had indeed spoken, but in a language of fragmented destinies. Farmer John, 1410, England. Young John, a robust and practical farmer, was urged by his superstitious mother to try the dumb cake ritual on Halloween night, a time she swore the veil between worlds was thinnest. She believed it would show him the ideal wife he needed to help manage his burgeoning lands and ensure a prosperous future for their lineage. John, a man more accustomed to the earthy realities of planting and harvest than to mystical rituals, begrudgingly agreed, finding the enforced silence awkward and the entire endeavor rather foolish. He mixed the ingredients clumsily in the dim light of the hearth, his large hands unused to such delicate work. In his haste, he accidentally dropped a metal spoon which clattered loudly on the stone floor, the sound echoing sharply in the quiet kitchen. He flinched, then simply shrugged, a small, wry smile on his lips, knowing that the spell was undoubtedly broken, continued to bake the cake out of a sense of duty to his mother, and later ate a piece, but slept dreamlessly, waking only to the familiar sounds of his farm animals greeting the dawn. He later married Martha, a strong, sensible, and tirelessly hard-working woman from a neighboring farm. There was no romance to their initial meeting, no grand vision, no mystical signs preceding their union. Their marriage was one of unwavering hard work, shared responsibilities, and practical affection, a true partnership that brought considerable prosperity and stability to their lands, much to his mother's delight. John never connected Martha to any prophetic dream, often chuckling about the silly cake his mother had made him bake, dismissing the entire experience as harmless superstition. The loud clatter of the dropped spoon perhaps was a truer omen of his grounded, unmystical future than any silent vision could have been. A life built on solid effort and tangible realities rather than fleeting dreams or magical signs. His was a future forged in the fields, not in the ether. Lady Rosamond, 1290, France. Lady Rosamond, a young woman of delicate beauty and a romantic spirit, felt confined within the ancient, isolated walls of her family's chateau in a remote part of France. She yearned desperately for a love match, a profound connection that would lift her from her secluded, often lonely existence. Driven by this deep longing, she resolved to perform the dumb cake ritual alone in the castle kitchen late one moonless night. She meticulously ensured that no servant would hear her. No sound would break the sacred silence, moving with an almost ghost-like quietness. She mixed and baked the cake with painstaking care, the only light coming from the dying embers in the vast hearth, their faint glow casting long, eerie shadows. Once the cake was cooled, she took her piece and, with a heart pounding with nervous anticipation, walked backward to her chambers, her bare feet silent on the cold stone floors. She placed it reverently under her pillow and lay down, her eyes wide open in the darkness, waiting for a vision, a sign, a face. She heard nothing, saw nothing, dreamed nothing. The night was utterly silent, utterly empty of any revelation. She woke with the first light of dawn, feeling utterly defeated, her hopes crushed by the profound emptiness of the experience. A few months later, her powerful and ambitious father arranged a marriage with a prominent but aging baron from a neighboring province, a purely political alliance designed to secure more lands and influence. This union offered Rosamond little joy, cementing her isolated existence rather than liberating her. Rosamond often thought of that empty, silent night after the dumb cake ritual, wondering if its silence, its absolute lack of vision, was a profound prophecy in itself. Perhaps it was a premonition not of a specific phase, but of the very quiet, unromantic life that awaited her, a life devoid of the passionate, visionary love she had so desperately yearned to see. The silence had indeed spoken, but in a language of absence and quiet solitude, a chilling confirmation that some desires, no matter how fervent, might remain unfulfilled by the grand sweep of fate. Number 1. Saint Agnes's Eve Ritual. January 20th. The eve of Saint Agnes's Day was believed to be one of the most potent and auspicious nights in the medieval calendar for love divination. Saint Agnes, a virgin martyr of the early Christian Church, was revered for her purity, her unwavering faith, and her miraculous intercession. It was believed that her exceptional virtue lent a powerful, almost sacred energy to romantic visions on the night before her feast day, making it an ideal time for young unmarried women in particular to perform rituals hoping to dream of or even glimpse their future husband. The spiritual purity associated with Saint Agnes was thought to cleanse the pathways for genuine, truthful prophecies concerning matters of the heart. This tradition has deep roots in a fascinating blend of ancient folk magic and Christian veneration, a common intertwining of beliefs in the medieval period. While the Church might have frowned upon overt pagan practices, many customs simply adapted, absorbing Christian saints into older magical traditions. English poet John Keats would later immortalize this night in his famous poem, The Eve of St. Agnes, but the beliefs and practices predated his work by centuries, especially prevalent in England, Scotland, and parts of Northern Europe. It was often a communal yet deeply secret undertaking among young women who would share the knowledge of the rituals in hushed tones, gathering together in anticipation but performing the most crucial parts in solitude. The solemnity and secrecy were considered vital, as was the purity of intention, for only then would the saint or other benevolent spirits grant a clear vision of one's destined beloved. One common and widely practiced method involved going to bed supperless, a minor act of asceticism believed to heighten spiritual receptivity. The young woman would then carefully place a sprig of fresh rosemary, an herb long associated with remembrance and love, and a bay leaf, symbolic of prophecy and truth, in each shoe. These shoes would then be tucked neatly under the bed or by the hearth, and before drifting into sleep, she would repeat a specific rhyme or charm, whispering it into the silence of her bedchamber, focusing intently on her desire to dream of her future spouse. Another, more daring variation involved going to a church at midnight, alone and in complete silence, scattering hemp seeds in the churchyard, and repeating a charm believing the future spouse would appear, walking behind her, gleaning the seeds. The absolute silence and strict secrecy were paramount throughout these rituals. Any spoken word, any burst of laughter, or any interruption could break the fragile spell and invalidate the entire prophecy, turning hope into disappointment. Lady Eleanor, 1455, England. In the drafty candlelit chambers of her family's ancestral castle, Lady Eleanor, a young woman of noble birth and gentle spirit, felt the insistent weight of an impending arranged marriage pressing down upon her heart. Her betrothed, Lord Atherton, was a man of stern countenance and an even sterner reputation, and Eleanor dreaded the prospect of a life bound to his rigid will and cold authority. Whispers of an old charm, the St. Agnes's Eve ritual, had reached her from her trusted ladies-in-waiting, a forbidden practice, yet one that offered a sliver of desperate hope. On the frigid night of January 20th, with the castle's ancient stones creaking in the winter wind, Eleanor prepared herself meticulously. After dismissing her maids and ensuring every door was securely latched, she performed the ritual in profound solitude. She went supperless, her stomach rumbling faintly, a small sacrifice for what she hoped would be a profound revelation. With trembling hands, she took sprigs of fresh rosemary and bay leaf, plucked discreetly from the castle garden, and carefully placed one in each of her silken slippers, tucked carefully beneath her bed. As the moon, a sliver of silver against the black velvet sky, peered through her narrow leaded window, she knelt by her bed, her breath misting visibly in the cold air. She whispered the ancient rhyme, the words feeling foreign yet potent on her tongue, her gaze fixed intently on the flickering candle flame. "Saint Agnes, fair and pure and bright, show me my love this blessed night," she murmured, her voice barely a breath against the quiet of the room. She extinguished the candle, plunging the room into near darkness, and slipped under the heavy furs of her bed, her mind filled with a desperate longing for a different future, a true love. That night her dreams were remarkably vivid, not the fragmented images of everyday sleep, but a coherent, luminous narrative. She found herself in a sun-dappled glade, where a tall, dark-haired man stood beneath a towering oak tree, his back turned to her. As he slowly turned, his eyes, kind and deep, met hers. He was not Lord Atherton, not any man she knew, but a stranger whose presence radiated a warmth that eased her anxious heart and filled her with an unfamiliar sense of peace. She felt a profound sense of rightness in his presence, a feeling that resonated deeply within her soul. She woke with the dawn, the dream clinging to her mind like a precious, fragile secret, a powerful vision of hope. Several months later, the intricate dance of medieval politics took an unexpected turn. Her father's shifting allegiances due to a territorial dispute led to a surprising twist of fate, and Eleanor's engagement to Lord Atherton was abruptly and mercifully broken. Relief, profound and dizzying, washed over her. Soon after, at a grand tournament held to celebrate a new treaty between their houses, she accompanied her father. Amidst the clashing steel and cheering crowds, her gaze fell upon a knight, Sir Thomas of Warwick, known for his prowess and his quiet courtesy. He was indeed tall, his hair the color of midnight, and as he doffed his helm after a joust, his eyes, direct and thoughtful, held a kindness that instantly drew her in. There was an undeniable sense of familiarity, a feeling that she had known those eyes before, even though they had never met. Their courtship, though still orchestrated by their families, felt like a swift, natural unfolding, a surprising alignment of hearts rather than a forced union. Their wedding was held within the year, a celebration that felt less like a duty and more like a true beginning. As the years passed, Eleanor often looked at Sir Thomas across their feasting table or watching him patiently instructing their children in the castle courtyard, and she would remember the vivid dream from that long ago St. Agnes's Eve. The specific features in her dream might have been a feeling more than a perfect portrait, but the essence of the man, his quiet strength and inherent goodness, had been undeniably foretold. She would sometimes share the tale with her daughters, always with a knowing, gentle smile, a quiet testament to a future glimpsed and then against all odds realized. Thomas the Weaver, 1380, Germany. Thomas, a pragmatic but deeply lonely weaver from a small German village, was a man who trusted the tangible threads of his loom more than the ethereal whispers of magic. He heard of the St. Agnes's Eve ritual from a traveling peddler who passed through his village, a man prone to exaggerated tales. Thomas scoffed aloud at the notion, yet a flicker of curiosity born of his solitude got the better of him. On the appointed night, he performed the simple version of the rite in the quiet solitude of his small, humble cottage, carefully placing the sprigs of rosemary and bay leaf into his worn shoes and attempting the rhyme in a low, embarrassed mumble, feeling utterly foolish as he did so. He quickly extinguished his lamp and slipped into bed, dismissing the whole affair. He slept soundly that night, dreaming of nothing but the mundane concerns of his trade, the tangled threads of a loom, the cost of wool, the precise measurements for a bolt of cloth. He woke with the dawn feeling utterly disappointed and dismissed the whole affair as nonsense, blaming his own foolishness for indulging in such a peasant superstition. A year later, his aunt, a bustling and practical woman, arranged a marriage for him with Agnes, a stout and industrious woman from the next village, chosen not for any romantic vision but for her good sense, her strong arms, and her family's reputable connections within the weaving guild. Thomas had never seen Agnes in a dream, nor had he ever felt a mystical connection to her, but their union was a solid one, built on shared labor and mutual respect. It brought stability and quiet prosperity to his small weaving business, and together they raised a robust brood of healthy children. He never spoke of his youthful attempt at the St. Agnes's Eve ritual to Agnes, or to anyone else. Perhaps he never felt a grand romantic love, but their marriage was a true partnership, a foundation upon which a good life was built. His future was indeed settled, just not by a grand romantic dream, but by the quiet, steady hand of practicality, a different kind of destiny entirely. Catherine of Valois, 1420. France. Even queens and princesses, whose lives were meticulously dictated by political necessity and dynastic ambition, were not immune to the whispers of fate or the alluring promise of prophecy. The young Catherine, then a princess of France, found herself a mere pawn in the ongoing brutal 100 Years' War. Her future hand a prize to be bargained for, her destiny uncertain. It is said, though verifiable historical accounts of personal rituals are rare for figures of such stature, that in her younger, more innocent days, before the weight of her crown truly settled, she might have indulged in such romantic practices. Perhaps she was urged on by her ladies-in-waiting, who might have shared the ancient lore. On one particular St. Agnes's Eve in the chill, echoing chambers of a grand castle in France, she might have carefully prepared the herbs, whispered the charm, and hoped with all her heart for a vision of her true love, rather than merely a political alliance. History tells us that she ultimately married King Henry V of England, a formidable warrior king, a man of immense power, ambition, and a stern, unyielding will. He was the very embodiment of the warring age. Did her dreams show her his determined, almost severe face, the man who would conquer her homeland? Or perhaps they showed her something else entirely, a vision that contrasted sharply with the harsh reality of royal marriage, leaving her with the quiet, poignant understanding that fate, even when glimpsed through prophetic dreams, is often complex, multifaceted, and rarely simple or purely romantic. Her future spouse was indeed a king, a reality that overshadowed any personal desires or hopeful prophetic insights. Her life, though marked by great power and historical significance, was also one of duty and often quiet personal sacrifice, a destiny far grander and more arduous than any simple dream of love might convey. The vision, if it came, would have been one of kingdom and conflict, not just a man. Young Arthur, 1395, Scotland. In a small, windswept Scottish village, young Arthur, a blacksmith's apprentice with strong arms and a lively imagination, was told by the elder women of the community that on St. Agnes's Eve, if he performed the ritual precisely, he would see his future wife. They instructed him to walk backward into a desolate moonlit field after midnight, sowing hemp seeds as he went and chanting a specific ancient verse, believing that his future spouse would then appear following behind him, silently gleaning the scattered seeds. Full of nervous excitement and boyish daring, Arthur ventured out into the biting cold of the frosty night, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He fumbled with the tiny hemp seeds in the darkness, whispered the chant into the frigid air, and squinted intently into the gloom, convinced he would see a ghostly figure emerge from the shadows. He saw nothing but the ancient trees swaying eerily in the wind, felt only the bitter cold biting at his exposed hands, and heard only the crunch of frozen grass beneath his feet. He returned home, disheartened, chilled to the bone, and somewhat embarrassed by his failed attempt. Years later, Arthur grew into a respected blacksmith, known for his strength and craftsmanship. He eventually married Alara, a cheerful and robust girl from a neighboring farm, a woman he had known since childhood, someone whose presence in his life was as familiar and comforting as the changing seasons. Their marriage was one of quiet companionship, shared labor, and unwavering support, built on the foundations of their shared community and mutual respect, far removed from the dramatic visions he had hoped for. He never saw Alara in the ghostly gleaning field that night, but she was always there, a steady, dependable presence in his life, proving that sometimes the future spouse is simply the one who was always meant to be, the familiar and true companion. No dramatic revelation or ghostly apparition needed to announce her arrival. Their love was forged in the reality of their shared life, not in the shadows of a dream.